Hello and welcome to a very special recording tonight. This is the third part of Tom Fress reading Rich Church, Poor Church, as I called it, the reading of Vatican Billions, the book by Avro Manhattan he did in 2011. Well, I just did a premiere video of the second part. Tom was there and I thought it would be nice to have Tom live on 11 years later to add something, if he wants to the third part. And whenever he feels that he needs now to say something that he didn't say in 2011, whether because he didn't know or it didn't come to his mind, then today he has the chance. So please say hello to Tom, who is live joining me today in this very special recording of the Vatican Billions. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Yerk, and hello to the listeners. And this is a privilege to be here. The reading of this book, it's still mind-boggling to me after reading this book live on the air in 2011, how important this information is to us today. And I want to point out, as Yerk did just a moment ago, that I participated in the second edition of this reading that we just concluded a few moments ago, where Avro Manhattan speaks directly about the donation of Constantine. Many of the listeners have never heard of such a thing as the donation of Constantine, but it's a forgery produced by the Vatican, which is supposedly came from Constantine the Great, the emperor of the Roman Empire. And in this forgery called the donation of Constantine, the Emperor Constantine donates to the Pope the entire world. The donation of Constantine literally, according to its interpretation by the papacy, establishes the papacy firmly as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. In other words, the very position of Christ in this world. King of Kings and Lord of Lords. No king may challenge his authority. No civil power, no government, no military, no power on earth can challenge the Pope's temporal power. He is the sovereign of sovereigns. Okay? And this gives the power of to the Pope to remove the crowns of the kings if they do not serve him. If the kings of the earth do not serve the papacy has the power to lift that crown off his head, and if he wishes, to lift his head right along with it. Okay? Now, this isn't ancient. This is today.
Yeah, Tom, I think it is important to maybe tell the people when they look at the Vatican flag that is just here in the picture now, that is the golden key representing the spiritual power overlaying the silver key representing the temporal power that you're just talking of, and they are put together with a red lace. And the point is that if you try to take the one away from the other, from the Pope, you will have bloodshed. And that's what the whole history is all about. And the foundation of Constantine, which is a forgery, admitted even by the Vatican, still is used today to tell the rulers of the world, if you try to put away the temporal power of the Pope or the spiritual power of the Pope or both powers, because he has both, that's why it's a state and a church, then you will pay with your blood. You, your country, your family, your church, everyone.
That's right. As a matter of fact, to demonstrate this power, if the papacy's civil authority was ever challenged or his spiritual authority was ever challenged, the papacy would just shut down the churches. And in Roman Catholicism, which was everywhere in the Dark Ages. That's why they call it the Dark Ages. Roman Catholicism ruled and reigned. If the Pope closed the churches, you couldn't get married, you couldn't get buried, you couldn't get baptized. That means you couldn't go to heaven. Literally, by closing the churches, the popes had the power to close the gates of heaven.
They put a whole country under interdict.
That's what it was called, an interdict. The papacy literally brought to a screeching halt all civil government and all religious government. And then, along with the interdict, the papacy usually commanded the people to unseat the king, and if necessary, unseat his head from his shoulders. Okay, that's how the papacy rules this world.
He even provoked revolutions like that, Tom, because the people were informed that it was because of their ruler that they could not marry, could not be baptized, could not be buried, could not do anything of the holy sacraments, as the church calls it. And that's, of course, calling for a revolution, to put the ruler away and put a ruler in the chair who is obeying to the Pope's rule.
That's right. This is literally how the popes ruled over the kings of the earth. Now, this is a concept that's biblical. The Bible teaches us that he, the Antichrist, reigns over the kings of the earth, but we don't take it to heart. We presume as though it's not happened yet. But this defines all of quote-unquote Christian history. The last 2,000 years of Earth's history has been dominated by this man of sin in Rome, this Antichrist in Rome. And he controls the governments of the world even today. And he does it by the very same means. And if you'll do any study at all into what really happened to JFK, you'll understand how it is that the papacy still rules over the kings of the earth. And I won't turn this into a big discussion about JFK. The listeners can do their own research. But look, the Vatican used Vietnam as a beachhead from which to launch a Roman Catholic creation in Southeast Asia. He wanted to Catholicize all of Southeast Asia. And Vietnam was to be that beginning, that genesis of a Catholicization of all Southeast Asia. And the Vatican put No Din Diem in as president and his brother as the inquisitor, and they were devout Roman Catholics. They served the papacy directly. And they're the ones who precipitated this Holy Roman Crusade to convert all of Vietnam to Rome, to Roman Catholicism. And JFK, who was the first openly Roman Catholic president of this country, was questioned by the Protestants. Are you going to let the Pope run the government? If we elect you president, are you going to let the Pope run the government like he does every other government in the world? John F. Kennedy said, no, I serve the people, not the Pope. And when he took office and he found out that Cardinal Spellman was literally running the Vietnam War from his cathedral in New York City, and when he found out that the No Din Diem brothers were actually working for the Pope, and that the United States government, the military of the United States of America, was literally a papal proxy war to Catholicize all of Southeast Asia, John F. Kennedy's vow to the Protestants was put on the fire. And instead of serving the Pope, John F. Kennedy had No Din Diem assassinated, and he stopped the Vietnam War. Now you know why John F. Kennedy had his crown removed and his head removed with it. Okay? This is no pipe dream. This is what really happened in the Vietnam War. This is the real cause for the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He was assassinated by our own papal government. Okay, this government is ruled by the priests and bishops and Jesuit priests of this country. The shadow government is the same in this country as it is in every other country in the world. If the government that is currently seated in your nation does not serve the papacy, then the Roman Catholic hierarchy, the priests, the cardinals, the bishops, the Jesuits, all assail your presidency. And this is what happened to John F. Kennedy. He stopped a papal proxy war. He stopped the Vatican from using United States resources, its blood, its guts, its guns, and its treasure to fight a Roman Catholic crusade in Vietnam. John F. Kennedy was true to his promise to the Protestants that he would not allow the papacy to run the government.
Yeah, that promise that he made to them. He said to the Protestants, I am not the Catholic candidate for the presidency, I am the Democratic candidate for the presidency who happens to be a Catholic.
He chose a lot of different ways to express the same sentiment, that he was never going to allow the Pope to run his government. And of course, when he took office, that's what he found. The papacy was already running the government, had been running the government for a long time before he ever even thought to run for office. And that's why Kennedy had to do what he did. And of course, he had his head lifted from his shoulders on camera at high noon in broad daylight, recorded for all the world to see, for every king, queen, prince, and potentate in the whole world to see what happens to a world leader, the most powerful political leader in the world, if you defy the papacy. Now, every president, every king, every queen, every prince, every potentate in this world knows he or she can be JFK'd for the same reasons or less. And every government is put on notice. You either serve the Pope or you plant daisies. It's no different today than it ever was. And Avro Manhattan is giving you the facts on the ground that the donation of Constantine, though it be a forgery, an admitted forgery, it lays the foundation to elevate the Pope of Rome to global sovereign, the unchallengeable global sovereign. He rules over kings and he rules over the churches. He rules over heavenly things. He rules over earthly things. And not only that, but he cannot be brought into question. His authority cannot be challenged. Anybody who listens to my voice, if you can recall ever a time in history where a pope was put on trial in a court, it has never happened. And this proves my point. That's all the evidence you need. No pope has ever been challenged in a court of law for crimes against humanity. No pope in the history of the papacy has ever been challenged for its immense crimes, its global crimes, its diabolical crimes, even the current diabolical crime, the global pedophile priest pandemic. No priest, no pope can be brought to trial. And you've seen it right before your very eyes. And it may have struck you why they can't do anything about this global pedophile priest pandemic. Well, now you know. Now you know. You don't need anybody else to tell you. And Avro Manhattan knows this. He reported this way back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And this was a very, very valuable book. And I'm going to try to restrain myself from making any further comments because I think I did a pretty good job in the original reading and discussion of this book. But I'll be here to add a thought or two if I happen to discover that I forgot something or I said something incorrect. But listen, everybody who calls himself a Christian needs to read this book. If you're in doubt at all about who the Antichrist is, who the man of sin is, who is the son of perdition, who is the beast, all you have to do is read this book. And you'll find out that he's not a figment of the future like they teach in the churches, a future Antichrist is going to cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. No, he's historical. He has ruled and reigned over the kings of the earth. He has ruled and reigned over the pastors and priesters of this world for nearly 2,000 years. The world has known for nearly 2,000 years who the Antichrist is, and we have no excuse to be dubious about it. None whatsoever. And this book is going to prove it to you just as well as any of the other books that I've ever read. This book is a slam dunk indictment of the papacy as the Antichrist of Scripture, history, and prophecy. And now it's time for you to know about it. Back to you, Jörg.
No, back to you, Tom. Let's start the audio.
Okay, I'm not hearing anything.
You're not hearing the audio, Tom?
No.
Okay, then I have to start sharing with Skype again, because we put that on, sharing the screen with the sound, and it used to work. Now, let's hear. Do you hear it now?
Good morning.
Yeah?
Yep, very well.
Okay, there we go again now.
Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Press, your host, and I'll be with you for the next hour. You're listening to LibertyRadio5.com. I'd like to recognize our listeners in Barcelona, Catalonia, Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, Shelton, Connecticut, Toronto, Ontario, and Inkster, and Detroit Lakes, Michigan. Lots of listeners this morning, and appreciate your attendance, your attention, and it's my pleasure to be here this morning. Before I continue with the book, The Vatican Billions by Avro Manhattan, I'd wish to touch just a bit on the news that came out last night that the United States Special Forces claim to have killed Osama bin Laden, known to us here at Inquisition Update as CIA operative Tim Osmond. But nonetheless, they're claiming victory now, having destroyed the head of Al-Qaeda, which is just setting us up for another a false flag terrorist operation. But there's been some conflicting reports, as one might expect from a confused American government, one that's not controlled by Americans but papists, and they've come out with a little contradictory information, some saying that they've already completed DNA analysis on the body, which means he died days ago, possibly weeks ago. And the mainstream report that he died yesterday and was immediately buried at sea. Yes, he was buried at sea. He's gone now. We don't have to worry about him, and no investigation can be done. But the truth makes a heck of a lot more sense, and hopefully sometime today on my website you'll see what I believe is closer to the truth. Pakistani President Benazir Bhutto, several years ago, in a live televised BBC report, announced to the world that Osama bin Laden had died. And that video will be posted on my website, and eventually some commentary about it as well. But that's not the focus of Inquisition Update. We're going to stay the course. We're talking about the donation of Constantine. What is it that gives the papacy his power, his divine right authority to rule the world? We're going to pick up where we left off last Friday on the broadcast, talking again about, still further about this donation of Constantine. It is a forgery. It's not true. It was man-made for the purpose of deceiving the world, and the world is deceived. Now, it says, by virtue of the donation of Constantine, this forged document, purportedly by the Roman Emperor Constantine, which donated all the earth to the papacy, By virtue of the donation of Constantine, therefore, the Roman Empire became a fief to the papacy. In other words, it became a fiefdom. The Pope is the king, and the Roman Empire is his territory, right? And it says, while the emperors turned into vassals, the popes into sovereigns. Okay? So now the Pope rules the kings of the earth. And it says, their age-old dream, the Roman dominion, became a reality. But a reality in which it was no longer the vicars of Christ, the Pope, who were subject to the emperors, but the emperors who were now subject to the vicars of Christ, the Pope. Now we have unfolding before our eyes, leaving the text of the book right now, we have unfolded before our eyes the manifestation of the fourth beast of Revelation, of Daniel chapter 2. The fourth and final beast. What makes him a beast? He becomes a king. He's not just an ecclesiastical figurehead. He is a temporal king, and it is the donation of Constantine, this forged document, that the papacy so clings to that gives him his kingly status over the world. Okay, this is a fulfillment of what the Bible calls him in Revelation chapter 17, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. All right? It says the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords will overcome them. Why? Because the Pope claims himself to be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And this is the basis wherein he makes that claim, the donation of Constantine. This is where the papacy began to reign over the kings of the earth. This is prophecy being fulfilled right here, the donation of Constantine. It identifies the papacy as the biblical Antichrist, the counterfeit of Christ. He is no legitimate King of Kings or Lord of any lords. He's a nuclear-powered blasphemer. And he arrogates himself to the throne of Almighty God. And he arrogates to himself the office of the Holy Spirit. And the donation of Constantine is the root and foundation of the papacy. He thinks himself now as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who now reigneth over the kings of the earth. I want to impress upon my listeners, I don't mean to be repetitious as though you're not intelligent enough to comprehend this. This is easy. I just want you to soak it up for a minute. This is the basis of the global fraud called the New World Order, which is simply the end game of what started with the donation of Constantine. The papacy is going to rule the world. It's prophetically declared. He already controls the kings of the earth. He's the king of all the kings. And that's not new. That started at the donation of Constantine in the early, the 7th century, the 8th century. Now, continuing, it says, the early concrete result of the donation of Constantine thus was to give a legal basis to the territorial acquisitions of the popes, granted them by Pepin and Charlemagne. Whereas Pepin and Charlemagne had established them sovereigns de facto, the donation of Constantine made them sovereigns de jure. In other words, it legitimized their rightful, divine right rule over the world. That's what the donation of Constantine does. It legitimizes the biblical Antichrist. This so-called divine right of a sinful, fallen, fleshly man to rule the world. And it's a very important distinction and of paramount importance in the claim for future territorial possessions. Remember, the donation of Constantine literally hands the world to the Pope. It's his right, his divine right to rule the world. First Europe and then the Western regions. Well, what are the Western regions? The Western Hemisphere. And that's what the New World Order is. Now, it continues. It's very significant that it was after the appearance of the donation of Constantine under Pope Hadrian in 774 AD that the papal chancery ceased to date documents and letters by the regnal years of the emperors of Constantinople, substituting those of Hadrian's pontificate. In other words, from that point on, documents and letters written or received by the papacy were dated in the year of our Lord God the Pope Hadrian. All right, so now time is determined by the papacy, and that shouldn't surprise anybody. I mean, after all, the calendars that we all observe are the calendars of the popes. The Julian calendar and it escapes me right now. Our calendars are made up by the papacy. Now, although there are no proofs that the document was fabricated by the Pope himself, yet it is beyond dispute that the style of the donation of Constantine is that of the papal chancery in the middle of the 8th century. In fact, moreover, that the document first appeared at the Abbey of St. Denis, where Pope Stephen spent the winter of 754 AD, is additional proof that the Pope was personally implicated in its fabrication. We're talking about the donation of Constantine. It's a forgery created by the popes, and it endows the popes with divine right to rule the world, spiritually and as a sovereign king. And it says, indeed, although here again there is no direct evidence, it is supposed that the donation of Constantine was forged as early as 753 AD and was brought by Pope Stephen II to the court of Pepin in 754 in order to persuade that monarch, Pepin, to endow the popes with their first territorial possessions. Okay, now we have this divine right ruler, the Pope, asking Pepin to endow him. He's going to use a secular king to endow him with possessions of land, conquests. That's going to change. That's going to flip-flop pretty soon. Just pay attention here. It says, once the papal states came into being, the document was concealed until it was thought that it could be used with his son, Charlemagne, who had succeeded his father, Pepin. The first spectacular materialization of the donation of Constantine was seen not many years after its first appearance, when Charlemagne, the most potent monarch of the Middle Ages, granted additional territories to the papal states and went to Rome to be solemnly crowned in St. Peter's by Pope Leo as the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in the year 800. So Charlemagne's going to the Pope to be crowned. He's going to get his power from the Pope. Here we are, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And it says the great papal dreams of A, the recognition of the spiritual supremacy of the popes over emperors, and B, the resurrection of the Roman Empire at long last had come true. The rebirth of the Roman Empire. But now it's the Holy Roman Empire. Did your mom ever tell you when you was little, when Christ comes, there'd be a revived Roman Empire in the world? My mama did. She was absolutely right. And history reveals. And it started way back in the 700s AD. Now, the subjugation of the imperial crown was not, however, enough. In other words, putting the kings under the feet of the Pope wasn't enough. If it was true that this put the source of all civil authority, that is to say, the emperor, under the Pope, it was also true that the distant provinces could not or would not follow the imperial example. In other words, we got to make sure that nobody else comes up in the world calling himself a pope. All right? So the Pope's got to protect his turf now. He's arrogated himself to the throne of Almighty God. Now he's got to protect his turf. He's got to bring all of the kings of the earth into subjection to him, and he can't have a foreign king in this western region coming up to challenge his authority. How did he do it? Very clever, and you'll be able to see it with your own eyes in this land today. Pay attention. It says the best way to make them obey, that is the kings of the earth, was by controlling the civil administration in the provinces. In other words, we've got to get control of all the political offices underneath these kings, so that if and when any king in the world decides to challenge the Pope, nobody's going to obey him. Because we've got control of everything from the vice president on down to street sweeper. And all the Pope's got to do as a replacement of the Son of God on earth says, this is a rebel king, you don't have to obey him. On pain of excommunication, you don't have to obey him. Okay? Pay attention, because this is exactly how the United States is organized. It says, the subjugation of the imperial power, of the imperial crown, in other words, the kings, was not, however, enough. If it was true that this put the source of all civil authority, that is to say, the emperor, under the Pope, it was also true that the distant provinces, we here in the West, could not and would not follow the imperial example. The best way to make them obey was by controlling the civil administration in the provinces. In other words, get control of all their governments, as had been done at its center with the emperor. As the Pope had made a vassal of the emperor, so equally the bishops had to make vassals of the civil authorities in their dioceses. Now, you can only make this one thing, that there are two governments in this country. There's a federal government that everybody recognizes, and then there's a fifth column, a secret government that works side by side. And that government is a hierarchical government of the Pope that is run by the cardinals, the bishops, the archbishops, and the parish priest in this country. It says the best way to make the kings obey was by controlling the civil administration in the provinces, as had been done at its center with the emperor, and as the Pope had made vassals of the emperor, so equally the bishops had to make vassals of the civil authorities in their dioceses. A diocese is a governmental power of the Roman Catholic Church. It's a shadow government. It is a fifth column of the Pope in every country. And that's how it operates. Now it says, by so doing, the Pope with a blindly obedient hierarchical machinery, who's he talking about? The bishops, the archbishops, the cardinals, and the parish priests, would control at will the civil administration of the whole empire. There's your fifth column for the Pope that undermines our government. And you'll find this form of government all over the world. This is how the Pope is bringing the whole world into subjection to his supreme and autonomous sovereign authority in the New World Order. And just like President Kennedy, if you rebel against the papacy, they'll take you out in broad daylight with cameras rolling and nobody will go to jail. Every king on the earth knows what will happen to them if they disobey the Pope. That's why all the kings of the earth go to Rome to kiss the ring of the Pope, to assure the Pope that they'll be good little Catholics. And if you ever wonder who really controls the government in your town, or your state, or your county, all you have to do is go to the head of the diocese. He is the one who calls the shots. The rest of it is just window dressing. What you see on television, all the politicians, they never admit this, but they all eventually find out. If they don't know when they enter office, they eventually find out there's a power in this country so vast, so powerful, that you even breathe a word under your breath against it, all of a sudden there'll be information rising that you've been sleeping with a prostitute, or you can't get a loan to operate your business, or some other scandal in your life. That's how this country operates. And that's the way it's always operated. And this same fifth column that exists and is tolerated and not even acknowledged in this country by the American people exists in every country in the world. This was the hierarchical governmental organization set up by the papacy in all lands, independent of, completely independent and immune from government or civil authority, as we're going to soon see. Now, it says, it was to put such a scheme into effect that yet another forgery, complementary to the donation of Constantine, appeared little more than a half a century later, again from nowhere. In 850 A.D., the pseudo-Isidorian decretals. I'll say it again, the pseudo-Isidorian decretals. In other words, the false Isidorian decretals. And Isidorian means they were authored by Isidore, and we'll talk about that more, and especially when we get into the book, The Papacy and the Civil Power by R.W. Thompson, eventually on the program. The pseudo-Isidorian decretals. They're also known as forgeries. They're better known as the false decretals, because they are forgeries, made their first official appearance. They are a heterogeneous collection of the early decrees of the Roman Catholic councils and popes. Their seeming purpose was to give a legal basis to the complaints of the clergy, the Roman Catholic clergy in the empire, appealing to Rome against the misdeeds of high prelates or of the civil authorities. See the conflict already arising between the hierarchy of Roman Catholic Church, the bishops, the cardinals, the archbishops, and the priests, against the civil authorities. All right? This what these pseudo-Isidorian decretals were seemingly all about, but there's a lot more to it. It says, although some of the contents of the decretals are genuine, a colossal proportion was garbled, forged, distorted, or entirely fabricated. This was in order to achieve their real aim. Now we're going to talk about the real aim of the pseudo-Isidorian decretals, the false decretals, those that were found after, even after the donation of Constantine. What is their real aim? To obtain additional power for the popes by giving to the abbots, the bishops, and the clergy in general authority over civil jurisdiction in all the provinces, thus establishing a legal basis for evading the orders of the provincial secular rulers. So they simply don't have to answer to any secular power. Now, look, if the Pope says he has the divine right to rule, that he sits in the chair of Peter the Apostle, the vicar of Christ, the replacement of the Son of God on earth, you don't think for a minute that he's going to let a cop haul him into court for stooping a little boy, do you? No. The Pope has to be immune, and he has to have power over all secular governments. That's the real government in this world. That's the New World Order. Now we're talking about the donation of Constantine and that which was piled upon it, the pseudo-Isidorian decretals that gives unlimited sovereign authority to the Pope and his priests. And I'm going to have... and by the way, before I continue, too, I want my listeners to know I'm going to eventually cancel my Yahoo email address. The new email address, I sent it out to everybody on my list, but for those listening in, if you wish to contact me, ask questions, make comments or criticisms, write me at tom@seawaves.us. That's Tom at Seawaves, 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 just like it sounds. If you're a coastal dweller, you'll know what a sea wave is. Seawaves.us. Tom at seawaves.us. And by all means, check out the website. It's slow, but coming along. It's called inquisitionupdate.org. Inquisitionupdate.org. That's INQUISITION update.org. I'm sorry I chose a name that's so hard for people to spell, but we gotta get a grip here. Inquisitionupdate.org. INQUISITION update.org. Now, continuing with the text of the book, it says the result of the pseudo-Isidorian decretals was that the Roman Catholic Church obtained important privileges. Among them, listen carefully, and you'll see this as facts on the ground today. Among them, immunity from the operation of the secular law. You wonder why they have such a hard time getting these pedophile priests in jail? They have immunity from the secular power. Let me just give you just one quote out of the most wonderful book that I've ever read, The Papacy and the Civil Power by R.W. Thompson. He says that one has about as much authority bringing a charge against a priest as a slave owner against his slave master. That's the attitude of the mentality that grew out of the donation of Constantine and the pseudo-Isidorian decretals. You can't sue a pope. He's immune. If he rapes your little boy, there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot bring a civil charge against the pope or his priests. Now, if you could level a civil charge against a priest, what would it do to his authority to be able to consecrate the wafer into the literal blood, body, soul, and divinity of Christ? The priest is known in the Roman Catholic Church as the creator of his creator. That's a pretty powerful position, right? Puts him even above the throne of Almighty God. That he can make his creator and put him in a piece of bread and offer him to you as an administration of grace. What value would that have anywhere in the world if a lowly peasant in America could bring a charge against the priest for pedophilia? No, you're not allowed to do that. Because you undermine the divine authority of the priest. And ultimately challenge the authority of the Pope. Now you know why they forged these pseudo-Isidorian decretals. It protects the papacy from any and all civil lawsuits. The result of the pseudo-Isidorian decretals was that the Roman Catholic Church obtained important privileges, among them immunity from the operation of the secular law, which put her out of reach of the jurisdiction of all secular tribunals. Hands off. You can't touch the Pope or his hierarchy. They're immune. They can do anything they want and get by with it. Now you say, now wait a minute, Tom, there have been some priests that have gone to jail. Yeah, simply because of the global outrage for this global pedophile pandemic. It was simply a cost-benefit analysis. What's the Pope going to do? Stand up in front of international television and say, we're immune? Our popes can do anything, our priests can do anything they want because of the pseudo-Isidorian decretals? No, they don't want you to know about the pseudo-Isidorian decretals or the donation of Constantine. The only ones in the world that are supposed to know about these things are the kings of the earth, those who are called by those who really don't know much, the rich ruling elite. Okay? The rich ruling elite are the priests of the Roman Catholic Church, starting with the Pope and his Jesuits and his Knights of Malta and his Knights of Columbus and his bishops, cardinals, archbishops, and priests. They are immune from civil authority, based on a forgery called the pseudo-Isidorian decretals, or the false decretals. They're forgeries. But the whole world revolves around the Pope because of the donation of Constantine and the pseudo-Isidorian decretals. And it says, in this fashion, the clergy, that's the priesthood, from the Pope right on down to the parish priest, acquired not only a peculiar sanctity, but put them above the ordinary people. And it obtained for them personal inviolability, which gave them an enormous advantage in all their dealings or disputes with the civil power. So we're talking about priestly sanctity, priestly sovereignty, and priestly immunity. If there's any charge to be made against a priest, it has to be taken to the Holy See. Only the Holy See has authority over accusations made against any of the Roman Catholic hierarchy. They're completely independent and above the civil power. Hands off. Rome has to take care of all her internal business. And if a peasant wants to bring a charge against a priest for pedophilia or any other crime, and there are many, 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 and we'll talk about many of them in this book, but if they go to the secular power and splatter it all over the television, they can be excommunicated. That means eternal damnation. So that means that if you're going to bring a charge against a priest, you better be able to give up your right to an eternal life in heaven. So what happens to all these poor children around the world? The Roman Catholic Church has so much power that it can turn the press against the victims and make them the accusers of the Roman Catholic Church, and that's what they do. Oh, they're just money grubbers. They just want to destroy the good name of the Roman Catholic Church. And that's what they do. They make the victims the criminals for attacking the Roman Catholic Church. And only when the scandal got so big did the secular power decide to hell with the donation of Constantine and the pseudo-Isidorian decretals. This is a crime that has to be stopped. And some members of the Jesuit Roman Catholic-controlled press just splattered it all over. And that's the only reason we know about it. Some independent journalist took it upon himself to blast this thing out where the people could see it. Now, it says, thus, thanks to a series of fabrications, forgeries, and distortions carried out through several centuries, and of which the donation of Constantine was the most spectacular, the popes not only obtained a vantage ground of incalculable value from which to extend their spiritual and temporal power, but rendered themselves practically independent of all secular authority. Even more, they saw to it that the statutes of emperors and kings, no less than the civil law of nations, be undermined, greatly weakened, and indeed obliterated by their newly acquired omnipotence. And the obvious question is, Tom, how did they do that? They put Roman Catholics in Congress. They put Roman Catholics in the White House. They put Roman Catholics on the Supreme Court. They put Roman Catholics in your state house. They put Roman Catholics in your local city government. And they write the rules and laws, and they make them to conform to Roman Catholic canon law. Never mind the Constitution. Never mind Bible law, the law of Almighty God. No, the laws that they pass gradually, incrementally replace the laws of the land with Roman Catholic canon law. And that's precisely what the Patriot Act does. And that's precisely what the presidential directives do. They replace constitutional law with Roman Catholic canon law. And what does Roman Catholic canon law say? You have no freedom of religion, you must be Catholic. You have no freedom of speech, you must not criticize the Pope.
I just want to add something here. I think that is very important to mention at this moment. They manifest that, or they cement that claim with concordats. And that is something that Richard Bennett spoke abundantly about in his video, Roman Catholic Control Through Civil Law, a video that Tom, as much as he can, and I, as much as I can, promote to watch. And the Patriot Act is kind of an American concordat. If they don't have a concordat, I don't know. If you go to a website called Concordat Watch, you'll see that about 170 nations at this time have a working concordat with the Roman Catholic Church. And in those concordats, it is plainly stated that the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, has all the power. They are equals with the state, but after that it is stipulated that, for example, a state cannot go out of a concordat by itself. It is impossible to step out of a concordat by itself because the power reigns with the Roman Catholic Church. And I think this is a very interesting addendum also for people to look after. Do you have a comment on that, Tom? Because you love this video by Richard Bennett, right?
Yes, I most certainly do. Highly recommend that video. But no one's ever going to understand what's really going on in this country unless they watch Richard Bennett's video, Vatican Control Through Civil Law. And I do highly recommend that video, and have ever since I came into this knowledge 25 years or so ago. But listen, I'll continue with your thought on the Concordat. Now, many of the knowledgeable listeners will claim foul here, that you and I have gone too far claiming the United States has a concordat with the Vatican. And it's true. There's no written concordat, at least not that's been admitted to or exposed. But they do have and have had a tacit agreement with the Vatican, and you And the proof of that is just simply how the United States operates. Okay? The proof of that is that the United States has functioned in the world as a papal proxy warrior. Okay? We are the global police force. And of course, it's couched in terms of protecting the United States democracy and promoting democracy around the world and fighting godless communism and every other godless regime. What in fact it is extending the papal authority all over the world. The United States single-handedly extends the papal power all over the world, and we do it by force. We do it at the cost of incalculable wealth and incalculable human resources and incalculable treasure. And the American people pay taxes to pay for these papal proxy wars and all of our influence around the world, be it political, military, economic, issuing sanctions against nations, depriving peoples and nations of food, natural resources, gas and oil, and money, and every other thing. We force other governments to comply to Roman Catholic canon law. That's what the United States is. And of course, that's exercising more power than any other nation in the world that has a written concordat with the Vatican. But what a written concordat does is makes Roman Catholicism the state religion. Okay? There may be other religions in the nation, but the Roman Catholic Church then becomes the state religion, and it's financed by tax dollars. Okay? It doesn't have to raise its own money. It's financed, supported by tax dollars, by government support, by taxpayer support. And I think anybody who would look into this would discover how much the federal government supports and upholds the Roman Catholic religion, as opposed to any other Protestant or evangelical religion. The Protestants and evangelicals, if they were wise, would never accept a dime from the government. Okay? This is Christ's church. We rely upon him and not the civil power. But Rome depends upon tax dollars to support its efforts in every country where there is a concordat. At least it maintains the right of the Roman Catholic Church to own property, to extend its real estate holdings, to not limit its financial investment in this country, and its eventual control of the country. That's what it's all about. The United States government actively protects the Roman Catholic Church's ability to dominate in society. Control education. That's why if you look at the head of the educational system in this country, there's a Roman Catholic. Same as the Roman Catholics are the majority in every form of government, including both the Democratic and Republican parties. Roman Catholics in government. Now, if these Roman Catholics all work together to make this country Catholic, to change the Constitution, or to do away with it altogether and make us all conform to Roman Catholic canon law, then somebody answer me the simple question, why should any Roman Catholic be allowed to hold public office? And let me remind the listeners something you were never told in history class when you were in high school. There was a time in colonial America, in the time of the colonies, where no Roman Catholic could hold any position of power in government, business, banking, or any other endeavor. No Roman Catholic could serve in this country. They couldn't conduct the Mass. They couldn't hold religious services. Why? Because in colonial America, they knew who the Antichrist was. They knew what the role the papacy played in the world. And they knew that the United States could fall just as did all the nations of the world under papal control during the Dark and Middle Ages. And so they tried to protect this country from papal influence. They couldn't keep all the Roman Catholics out of the country. They were flooding in from everywhere. European Roman Catholics got their heads together and said, if we're going to take over America, we have to flood that nation with Roman Catholics so that eventually we will rule the government. And that's been their strategy ever since. And on Inquisition Update, I've read books proving this assertion. Historical facts that cannot be denied, that Rome has concertedly tried to take over this country and its government and make it Roman Catholic.
Yeah, they did that especially, Tom, in the 19th century under Jesuit General Rotan and Bex, who flooded the country with Irish immigrants. And some of these Irish immigrants are known today in the United States of America as, for example, people like Ronald Reagan. But let's not forget that Kennedy is also of that route.
So is Ronald Reagan.
And Joseph Biden, your ruling president in 2022. Irish Catholic, hardcore Catholic roots.
That's right. And if anybody questions anything that we've just said, all you have to do is listen to my reading and discussion of the book entitled The Global Vatican by Knight of Malta Francis Rooney. I read every word of that verbatim on the air and commented on it, and you will see that if the United States can possibly claim that it does not have a concordat with the Vatican, you'll see by the reading and discussion of this book that there is in fact a tacit concordat with the Vatican, unwritten concordat with the Vatican, and we have been exercising our role as papal defender, papal promoter all over the world for nearly as long as this country has existed. The United States foreign and domestic policy. That's our policies concerning other nations around the world and all of our internal policies that regulate every one of our daily lives are set forth by the Vatican. Our foreign and domestic policies are set by the Roman Catholic Pope and his hierarchy. That's what happens when you allow the Roman Catholic shadow government to occupy a fifth column in your nation. Our government must obey the Roman Catholic hierarchy, the shadow government of this country. You know, you ever watch, all these people talk about the shadow government this, shadow government that, but nobody will tell you who it is. What a secret. And it's not so secret to God's people. It's not so secret to historical Protestantism. It's not so secret to the saints and the martyrs of Almighty God throughout the ages, throughout the entire Christian era. We've always known who the Antichrist is, and he's visible in every neighborhood, in every town and village in this country. And it marks out its own states and counties by dioceses.
Yeah, just
and
want
over
to say,
every one.
Here is your shadow government right in the picture. Catholic dioceses in the United States of America.
Those are the dioceses over which a bishop rules, a Roman Catholic bishop rules. And the most powerful member of your local diocese is the Roman Catholic bishop. And he oversees the civil government. And if the civil government decides to run rogue against the papacy, then all hell comes loose in the country. And that's not true only in the United States. That's true all over the world. Wherever there are Roman Catholic churches, there are Roman Catholic people, and wherever there are Roman Catholic churches and Roman Catholic people, there are the Roman Catholic shadow government in every land, and their purpose is to rule over all the people, Roman Catholic and otherwise. This is how the papal power is extended in every land, and no king in any country can defy the papacy, or this shadow government, this Roman Catholic fifth column, goes into action, and that government is overthrown. And it's the most visible case that I can name, that you can see with your own eyes to testify to this fact, is the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
And this is how they took England in the 1850s with the building of the dioceses. And a few of the builders that put the Oxford movement into practice were Cardinal Wiseman and Cardinal Newman. By the way, Newman, a convert from Protestantism, who is now declared a saint in the Roman Catholic Church. And they were on the basis of these dioceses that you see on your picture right now in England.
Yep. Yeah. And that's just the United States and England. I mean, surely anywhere on the internet you can find similar maps of every country, everywhere in the world where Roman Catholicism rules and reigns.
Yeah, I have them here in Czechoslovakia, as you can see. I didn't do all the countries, but yeah.
Sure, and of course every country that has a written concordat, that supersedes every constitution, every elected government, every appointed government, every other kind of government. The concordat is the papal government over that nation.
And just look at the oldest archdiocese in the United States of America, the Archdiocese of Baltimore, from 1789 to 2014.
Right. Baltimore was the first Roman Catholic hell that took shape in this country. Baltimore was the seat, and still is the seat of power of the Jesuits in this country.
Names like Georgetown come to mind. But Tom, I think we're going to continue for 12 minutes in your wonderful reading, if you allow.
Please do.
But I just wanted to make this point, and especially with the video of Richard Bennett, as you can see here, Vatican Control Through Civil Law. It is on my channel, The Papacy is the Antichrist, where this video comes out also. Just do a search. When you go into my channel, just look for Vatican Control. You will see, as it came here, popping up. You have this here, and this is the video here, Vatican Control Through Civil Law, on the 3rd place. So you'll see that. Easy to find, and it's really a wonderful one. By the way, a German sister in Jesus Christ of mine translated the transcript of the video. She watched the video, she turned on the titles, she wrote down the complete English text and then translated it into German, and I made 2 videos for German visitors on my main channel. They can watch these, where Vatican Control Through Civil Law is translated word by word from Richard Bennett into German. But now, let's continue with Tom and the global Vatican again.
King, unless, of course, he rebels against the Pope, in which case he is to be killed. The people of the earth are to rise up and kill a heretic king, and do it in the name of God, the Pope. You have no right of self-defense. The Pope is your defense. And if you offend the Pope, you're not allowed to have a gun to defend yourself against his Inquisition. And you don't have the right to elect your own king. That's the Pope's business. Now you say, but Tom, we have elections in this country. Yes, we do. Absolutely do. You go to the polls to pick one of 2 papal candidates. So no matter which one you vote for, Democratic candidate or Republican candidate, you get one of the Pope's men. They're all picked by the Council on Foreign Relations, which is run by the Knights of Malta. They pick all the candidates for president. If somebody gets loose and runs on their own money, well, they can't get financing, they can't get press time, they can't get any exposure. And then the Jesuit-controlled press makes him out to be a loony bin. Boy, this man thinks he's qualified to run for president? You got to be kidding. And if that doesn't work, they make threats against his family. as we saw in the case of Ross Perot. They've got it all wrapped up, folks, is what I'm telling you. They've got every government wrapped up. And the people have absolutely no say. This New World Order comes as the Pope dictates it. And it's not just the United States, it's the whole world. And if a nation or a group of nations resists the New World Order, we have what happened in Vietnam. Vietnam, why did we go by Avro Manhattan? Or we have the current war, the Holy Roman Crusade against the Muslims. The United States is being used as a battle axe for the Pope. That's what we never fight a war for our own sovereignty and independence and liberty. We fight to help subdue the world for the Pope. And right now, some of the Muslims don't like the Pope very good. And so they've riled up all kinds of controversy in the Muslim world to topple the Muslim governments, to replace them with those that will cooperate with this New World Order. It's the United States and the CIA and all the intelligence services that do this. And whether or not they know it, they're simply following the decrees of the donation of Constantine and the pseudo-Isidorian decretals. And I want you to understand the value of this information, because you're not supposed to know this. Because if you know this, it puts the onus directly on the papacy. So what goes on in the world has to be covered up by this Hegelian dialectic puppet show that takes place in front of the mainstream and the alternative medias. The liberals versus the conservatives versus the liberals, the Democrats versus the Republicans, the fascists versus the communists. That's what we are supposed to focus our eyes on. Never comprehending that both of them are controlled by the papacy. It's a smokescreen, people. That's why I get so uptight when people send me all these articles about, oh, Barack Obama did this and Barack Obama did that, and Bush was this and Bush did that, and the Republicans are this and the Democrats are that. I'm telling you, you're missing the whole message. You're missing the whole thing. They both work for the Pope, and if they don't, they're scandalized. Both political parties serve eventually the papacy, and it looks like there's really a competition between liberal versus conservative versus liberal. It's very convincing charade. Very, very, very convincing. And so convincing that most of the American people dedicate their time, their free time, to studying what takes place on the political stage. And that's to make sure they never look behind the curtain, the backdrop, to find the papacy pulling the strings of all the puppets on the stage. And no matter what political power is in control of our government, the Democrats or the Republicans, what is consistently eroded is our Constitution, our Bibles, and our liberties, and our money, our wealth, and our property. Because the goal, eventually, is to destroy this country, because it's the only power on the face of the earth that could threaten the papacy if it ever woke up. Now that we've achieved and brought all the nations of the world into the political, the temporal, and the spiritual realm of the papacy in the New World Order, the Pope's ready to do a Napoleon on us and leave us at Waterloo. And that's exactly what's going to happen. That's what is happening in this country. There's a Holy Roman Inquisition coming to this country, the likes of which you can't even comprehend unless you understand the Bible and history. And that's what Inquisition Update is all about. Now, we're just going to get started. This is Chapter 4. The Roman Catholic Church claims ownership of the Western world. This affects you. No matter where you're listening in the world, this affects you. It says, once rooted in tradition and strengthened by the credulity of the times, the dubious seedlings of the donation of Constantine grew into a mighty oak tree under the shadow of which papal authoritarianism thrived. Let me read that again, because I'm going to show you that it's a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Once rooted in tradition and strengthened by the credulity of the times. In other words, there'd been so much talk about the pseudo-Isidorian decretals amongst the kings of the earth and the papacy. It became a part of the tradition of the kings of the earth and the papacy. There'd have been plenty of time to digest and plenty of time to promote the legitimacy of this donation of Constantine and the pseudo-Isidorian decretals, that it became part of the fabric of society. Unbeknownst to the people, of course, but the hierarchy. Once rooted in tradition and strengthened by the credulity of the times, the dubious seedling of the donation of Constantine grew into a mighty oak tree under the shadow of which papal authoritarianism thrived. Now, papal authoritarianism was equated all over the world and still is today as Christianity. And there's a parable in the Bible of that called the mustard seed. What about that parable? That it grew into a giant tree, so big, its branches so broad, that the birds of the air roosted in its branches. Is that what you get from a mustard seed? One of the tiniest little seeds there are? No, you get a mustard plant. It's a little shrub. It's a bush, equivalent to each of the little mustard seeds that Jesus and his apostles planted all over the world. Independent little churches, led by the Holy Spirit of Almighty God. But something happened to it. It had a genetic mutation. It became a chimera. It became an abomination. A global, vast, broadly branched tree in which the birds of the air, another equivalent of demons in the Bible, birds of the air, birds of prey, roosted in its branches. What's it talking about? The Roman Catholic Church. It's not Christianity at all. It's a chimera. It's a genetic mutation of the first church of Jesus Christ. This is prophecy fulfilled. Avro Manhattan doesn't even realize what he's saying. Avro Manhattan does. Did I lose something here? Hello? Am I still on the air? Anyway, Avro Manhattan doesn't even realize what he's saying here. Once rooted in tradition and strengthened by the credulity of the times, the dubious seedling of the donation of Constantine grew into a mighty oak tree. There's your tree, in the which the birds roost. The mighty oak tree, under the shadow of which papal authoritarianism thrived. In other words, Catholicism, now called Christianity, has thrived. And it says, from the birth of the Carolingian Empire in the year 800 AD onwards, the gifts of Pepin, the donation of Constantine, and the false Isidorian decretals were assiduously used by the pontiffs to consolidate their power. This they did until the additional forgeries and the arbitrary exercise of spiritual and temporal might. These documents became the formidable foundation stone upon which they were eventually to erect their political and territorial claims the rock upon which stood the whole papal structure of the Middle Ages. And all we're seeing now is the Middle Ages applied globally. The Pope controlled the kings of the earth during the Middle Ages, and now it's global. That's what the New World Order is. And I hope you comprehend this. I hope to hear from my listeners sometime in email. Tom@seawaves.us. I'll see you tomorrow on the broadcast. Thanks for listening.
And that was the reading of the Vatican Billions number 3 with Tom live on the broadcast and with me also, not just only the audio playing, and I think it is more than legitimate to give Tom a final comment on this video and round it up, and we're going to see each other next time. Tom?
Well, I hope the listeners quickly grasp the importance of this book and the revelation that it is to God's people. And they take the initiative to invite God's people to hear the truth that is so secret and so much withheld from our knowledge, even by our own pastors. This is common knowledge among the hierarchy of the world that rebel against Christ and make slaves of us all. Those who make slaves of God's heritage, they all know these things. And this is what makes all the difference. And this room should be busting at the seams with listeners to this book. I highly recommend, again, Richard Bennett's book, Richard Bennett's video, Vatican Control Through Civil Law, and I highly recommend this book, The Vatican Billions, by Avro Manhattan. Both are free on the internet. Just Google the titles. And I'm looking forward to the next installment and revelation for God's people. Knowledge is power. And the truth is the most powerful. And this is the proof. This is the truth that can set you free. Bible prophecy fulfilled right before your very eyes. This is information and knowledge that no one can contradict, no one can take away from you, and no one can control you anymore. You belong to Christ and Him only. And those who are deceived in this world deserve to be deceived because they love not the truth.